All right, so we're going into our next lesson. Now, we are finding all roots of a polynomial given one complex root. So last time it was one rational root. Now it's one complex root. So remember, a complex root is a root that has an imaginary part and it has a real part. So here it says a graph of f of x equals x to the fourth power plus 2x to the third power minus 4x squared plus 8x minus 32 is shown. So they show us the graph. It says, how many roots can you identify on the graph? Okay, so by looking at the graph, we can only see two roots, 1 and 2. Okay, now the degree of our polynomial function is 4. It's the highest exponent here, which means as the degree of the polynomial is 4, then it must have 4 roots. But we can only see 2 on there, which means that we only have 2 real roots, and the other ones are imaginary, or the other 2 roots are complex numbers. Okay, so that's what we're going to figure out. Which ones are the imaginary roots or the complex number roots? So here, given 2y is a root of the function f of x equals x to the fourth power plus 2x cubed minus 4x squared plus 8x minus 32, find the remaining roots. So from the information given, we can reach the following conclusion. So the first conclusion is the degree of f of x is 4. That means that the function is going to have 4 roots. One of the roots is 2i. Okay, if 2i is a root of the function, then x minus 2i is a factor of f of x. Now, this is something that's going to be new. Not only it says here, if 2i is a root of the function, then negative 2i is also a root, as imaginary roots are always come in conjugates, which means if you have a positive imaginary root, you're also going to have the positive and the negative one. So if x minus 2i is a factor, then x plus 2i is another factor. Okay, so that's the only piece of information that's going to be new. It is going to be a little bit similar. So we're going to go ahead and multiply x minus 2i and x plus 2i to see what that gives us. And it is going to give us something here. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply using box method. So step 1, multiply. What would we call these? Factors. Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead and multiply box method. We have x minus 2i and x plus 2i. So that gives us x squared, 2ix, negative 2ix, and then 2 times negative 2 gives me negative 4, I times I gives me I squared. Okay, so when I rewrite this, I am going to write it as, I'm going to write it up here, sorry. X squared minus 2ix plus 2ix minus 4. And remember, whenever you see an I squared, you have to rewrite that as a negative 1. Well, these two cancel each other out. They're equal to 0 when you add them together. So we get x squared, negative 4 times negative 1 gives me plus 4. So here we got x squared plus 4. Okay, once we multiply the factors, our second step is to divide. So just like we did last time where we would go synthetic division, quadratic formula, unfortunately, we cannot use synthetic division for this one because you are dividing by x squared plus 4. Remember, when you use synthetic division, this one cannot be squared. So that means that we're going to have to use long division, unfortunately. So here, I am going to write this as x squared. We do have to fill in the 0, so it'll be plus 0x plus 4. And we're dividing this into x to the fourth power plus 2x to the third power minus 4x squared plus 8x minus 32. Sorry, I went into the next section. All right, and then remember, we cannot get a remainder. If you get a remainder, you need to go back and check your work. So we start off with step 1. We divide x squared and x to the fourth power. So that means that x squared times what gives you x to the fourth power? Well, x squared times x squared gives you x to the fourth power. And then we multiply x squared times x squared is x to the fourth. x squared times 0x is 0x squared. X squared times 4 gives you 4x squared. Okay, and then we go ahead and subtract. So we put minus, minus, and minus. X to the fourth minus x to the fourth cancels. 2x cubed minus 0x cubed gives you, whoops, this should be cubed, sorry. 2x cubed minus 0x cubed gives you 2x cubed, and then negative 4x squared minus 4x squared gives me negative 8x squared. And then we drop the next one, so 8x. Okay. After you subtract, you start all over. So we have an x to the second power, and we need 2x to the third power. So x squared times what gives us 2x to the third. So here we are going to see, well, we need the 2 for sure, so it's going to be plus 2 because it's a positive 2. And then we multiply, let's see, x squared times what gives us x to the third power? Well, x times x squared gives you x cubed. So we multiply 2x times 2x squared, multiplying right here. That gives us 2x cubed. Then we multiply 2x times 0x, so that gives you 0x squared. Then we multiply 2x times 4, that gives us 8x. And then we go ahead and subtract. So minus, minus, and minus. This cancels out. Negative 8 minus 0 gives us negative 8x squared. And then we have a positive 8x minus an 8x. That's going to give us 0x. Remember, I'm going to fill in the 0. And then we drop the next one. So minus 32. Then we start over again. So we have an x squared and we need a negative 8x squared. So I am missing a negative 8. So negative 8 times the x squared gives us negative 8x squared. Negative 8 times the 0 gives me 0x. And negative 8 times 4 gives me negative 32. All right, so we go ahead and subtract. So this negative 8 turns into a positive. We subtract this one. This one turns into a positive when we subtract. So this cancels, this cancels, this cancels. Our remainder is 0, which is how it's supposed to be. So that means that x squared plus 4 times x squared plus 2x minus 8. Okay, so from there, we're going to go ahead and use the quadratic formula. Plus 2x minus 8. And we identify our a, b, and c. So a is 1, b is 2, although what did come out? And c is negative 8. So this is the third step, quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. Okay, so this is 3 steps, okay? I want you guys to get super worked up on all the work. It is a lot of work, but it is only 3 steps that you have to follow. You multiply, you do your long division, and then you go into the quadratic formula. Okay, so x equals negative b. So if b is already negative, hold on, let me fill in all these. Then it ends up turning to a positive, but it's not. B is a positive, so it'll be negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times a is 1 times c is negative 8. And all of this is over 2 times 8. We go ahead and start simplifying this. So we do the part under the square root first. So it'll be negative 2 plus or minus. On the bottom, it is 2. And then we figure out what is under that square root. All right, so let's see. It'll be 4 minus, or 4 plus 32. 4 plus 32, which gives us 36. And so we can take the square root of this and get a whole number. This is negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 36 is 6 over 2. We divide each one by 2. So negative 2 divided by 2 gives us negative 1 plus or minus 6 divided by 2 gives us 3. Now negative 1 plus 3, we go ahead and split into two different ones. Negative 1 plus 3 and negative 1 minus 3. Negative 1 plus 3 is 2. And then negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. Okay, so the four roots of the polynomial function are, so here the first one is 2. The next one is negative 4. And then our two imaginary ones, which one of them was positive 2i and the other one was negative 2i. And that's it. All right, so we're going to try this again. So here it says, given I is a root of the function, f of x equals x to the fourth power plus x to the third power minus 5x squared plus x minus 6, find the remaining roots. So from the given information, we can reach the following conclusion. The degree of f of x is 4. The function has 4 roots. I and negative I are roots of the function. So x minus I and x plus I are factors. So that means that x minus I times x plus I times these other two factors, which we don't know, would give us x to the fourth plus x cubed minus 5x squared plus x minus 6. So we go ahead and multiply these two. Remember, we have 3 steps. We multiply. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply. We have x minus I, x plus I. That gives us x squared, ix, negative ix, and negative I squared. We write it out. We get x squared minus ix plus ix minus, and then instead of I squared, we write it as negative 1. Okay? This is the minus, and then the I squared we substitute as negative 1. So that means that two negatives make a positive. These cancel each other out, so we're left with x squared plus 1. Okay, once we figure that out, that means that we're going to have to divide this equation by x squared plus 1. Remember, we have to divide using long division because we can't use synthetic division. I fill in the missing term. So x to the fourth plus x cubed minus 5x squared plus x minus 6. Okay, so we start with the first one. We have x to the fourth power here and then x squared. So x squared times what gives us x to the fourth? Well, x squared times x squared gives us x to the fourth. Then we multiply it. X squared times x squared gives us x to the fourth power. X squared times 0x gives us 0x cubed, and x squared times 1 gives us 1x squared. We go ahead and subtract, so minus, minus, minus. These cancel each other out. 1 plus 0 gives us 1x cubed. Negative 5 minus 1 gives us negative 6x squared, and then we drop the next one, plus x. Okay, once we drop, we start all over. So we have an x squared here, and we need a 1x to the third power. So x squared times x gives us 1x to the third power. So we go ahead and multiply x times x squared is x cubed. X times 0x is 0x squared. And x times 1 is just an x. Okay, we go ahead and subtract. We ran out of space. So when we subtract 1x cubed minus 1x cubed, cancels. Negative 6 minus 0 gives us negative 6x squared. X minus x gives us 0x. Okay, you can put plus or minus here, it doesn't matter, because if you add 0 or you subtract 0, it's still the same thing. And then you drop the next number, so minus 6. Okay, once you drop, that means you start all over. X to the second power, and we need a negative 6x to the second power. Well, we already have the x to the second power, so all we're missing is a minus 6. So negative 6 times x squared is negative 6x squared. Negative 6 times 0x is 0x. Negative 6 times 1 is negative 6. Then we go ahead and subtract. So when you subtract a negative, that turns into a positive. We subtract the 0x, and then when we subtract a negative 6, that turns into a positive. and in turn, everything cancels. Okay, if everything does not cancel, you did something wrong. So this means that x squared plus 1, which is what we got from multiplying our conjugates, and x squared plus x minus 6, which is what we found after we divided, is going to give us our solution. So we're going to go ahead and figure out with quadratic formula x squared plus x minus 6. A is 1, B is 1, and C is negative 6. Okay, so then from there we plug it into our quadratic formula. So x equals negative b. So the opposite sign of b, if b is positive, then it turns into a negative. So negative 1 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So b is 1, so 1 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, times c. C is negative 6. And all of this is over 2 times a. I already wrote a is 1. And then we start to simplify. So we always start with what is under the square root. So negative 1 plus or minus, we're going to do 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 6, and that gives us 25. We can take this forward to 25 and get a whole number. It gives us 5, and we divide it by 2. So unlike the other problem, we can't divide each one by 2 and get a whole number. So I'm just going to break it up. 1 plus 5 divided by 2. 1 minus 5 divided by 2. Okay, so 1 plus 5 is 6, and 6 divided by 2 gives you 3. 1 minus 5 is negative 4, divided by 2 gives you negative 2. Okay, so that means that the 4 roots of the polynomial are negative I, positive I, 3, and negative 2. Alrighty, the last section. Okay, so here it says find the polynomial with zeros 4, 3i, and negative 3i passing through the point 1, negative 60. So we had done some problems like this, except with regular numbers, not imaginary numbers. Okay, so if 4 is a root of the polynomial, then x minus 4 is a factor. If 3i is a root of the polynomial, then x minus 3i is a factor. If negative 3i is a root, then x plus 3i is a factor. And then at the very end, we'll go ahead and make it pass through 1, negative 60. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to multiply. So I'm going to start off by multiplying my conjugates first, these two, and then we will multiply the x minus 4 once we are done multiplying these two. Okay, so I'm going to do this off to the side in a box. We have x minus 3i and x plus 3i. Once you catch on to the pattern, you won't have to use the box method. I make it a little bit easier, but x times x is x squared. 3 times x is 3ix. Negative 3i times x is negative 3ix, and negative 3 times 3 gives us negative 9. I times 9 gives us I squared. So this gives me x squared minus 3ix plus 3ix, and then minus 9. And instead of the I squared, remember you have to substitute it for negative 1. So we get x squared. These cancel each other out, and when negative 9 times negative 1 gives us plus 9. So here x squared plus 9. So now we don't have any more imaginary numbers. We're going to go ahead and multiply these two to get another polynomial. So here, make another box method. Let me go ahead and make it ready with what I have written here. And then we have x minus 4. So x times x squared gives me x cubed. Negative 4 times x squared is negative 4x squared. 9 times x is 9x. And negative 4 times 9 is negative 36. So I go ahead and write it out. X to the third power minus 4x squared plus 9x minus 36. Now there's no like terms to combine. So next we're going to go ahead and make it pass through this point, 1, negative 60. Okay, so this means, if you guys recall from one of the previous lessons, f of x equals, we need to put a number there for a in order for us to be able to make it cross through 1, negative 60. So the way that we do that is we plug in that point. So instead of f of x, we write negative 60 equals, a, we don't know what it is, that's what we're looking for, times, everywhere where we see an x, we're plugging in a 1 because this is 1. So 1 to the third power minus 4 times 1 squared plus 9 times 1 minus 36. So we can put all that in our calculator exactly the way we see it, or you can do mental math, and we're trying to figure out what a is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in my calculator real quick. 1 minus 4 plus 9 minus 36. This gives me negative 30. Okay, so our last step to solve for a is to divide by the negative 30. Once we divide by negative 30, negative 60 divided by negative 30 gives us 2. So that means a is equal to 2. Okay, we take that and we plug it in here. So we have f of x equals, we found out that a was 2, and we have to multiply it times our polynomial. X cubed minus 4x squared plus 9x minus 36, and that's what's going to make it cross through that point that they told us. So we distribute, boom, 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 boom. So we get f of x equals 2x to the third power minus 8x squared plus 18x minus 72. And that's it. So this polynomial will cross through those 3 zeros that they gave us, or those roots, and then it will cross through the point that we gave us. All right, that's it. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.